I've always loved driving at night. The empty roads, the cool air, the peacefulness of it all. It used to be my favorite time to think, but ever since that night, I don't drive late anymore. Not unless I absolutely have to. It happened about a year ago. I had taken a road trip to visit my cousin, who lived a few states away. The plan was simple: spend the weekend catching up, then drive back home Sunday night to avoid the Monday morning traffic. I had done long drives before, so a 6-hour trip at night didn't seem like a big deal. I left around 9 p.m. The first few hours were uneventful, just the occasional car passing by, the glow of gas stations dotting the highway, and my playlist keeping me company. But around midnight, something changed. That's when I first noticed the van. It was an old white cargo van, the kind with no windows on the sides. I had just passed a small town and was driving on a long, dark stretch of road when I saw its headlights in my rearview mirror. It was following behind me, keeping a steady distance. At first, I didn't think much of it. There wasn't much traffic, so it wasn't unusual to have a car behind me for a while. But something felt off. The way the van moved, it never sped up to pass me, never fell too far behind. Just stayed there, like a shadow. I switched lanes to see if it would pass. It switched lanes too. I sped up a little. It sped up too. Now, my heart was starting to race. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking it, but I had been driving long enough to know that this wasn't normal. I decided to test it. I took the next exit, a random turn off the highway into a small, dark road. I wasn't even sure where it led. I just wanted to see if the van would follow. It did. By now my hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. This was real. Someone was following me. I didn't want to panic, but my mind was racing. What did they want? Was this some kind of road rage situation? Was it a carjacker? I checked my gas. I still had half a tank. I didn't want to stop, but I also knew I couldn't keep driving aimlessly. Then, I saw a gas station up ahead. It was one of those 24-hour truck stops. Bright lights illuminating the pumps, a few cars parked out front. I made a split-second decision. I pulled in fast, parking right near the entrance. The van hesitated for a moment, then kept driving past. I exhaled, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. Maybe it was over. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. But just as I started to relax, I saw it again. The van had turned around. It was parked across the street, its engine still running. I couldn't see the driver. The windows were too dark, but I knew they were watching me. At that point, I had two choices: get back on the road and risk being followed again, or go inside and wait them out. I chose the second option. I walked into the gas station, trying to act normal, but I was hyper aware of everything. The cashier, an older guy, was behind the counter, and two truckers were sitting at a table in the corner. I grabbed a bottle of water and stood near the window, keeping an eye on the van. It didn't move. Minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Still, the van didn't leave. By now, the cashier must have noticed how tense I was because he spoke up. "You okay, kid?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I think someone's following me." His face darkened. "White van?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah." He nodded like he had heard this before. They've been around. Seen him a few times. Always late at night. Never buy anything. Just sit outside watching people. That was enough for me. I wasn't going back on the road alone. I explained my situation to the truckers, and one of them, a big guy named Dale, offered to let me follow him back onto the highway. "If they're still out there, they won't mess with you, if you're not alone." I agreed. We walked out together, and just like that, the van's headlights turned on. It pulled away slowly, disappearing into the darkness. I never saw it again. To this day, I don't know who was in that van or what they wanted, but I know one thing for sure. If I hadn't stopped at that gas station, if I'd stayed alone on that empty road, I might not be here telling this story. It was around 2 a.m. when I decided to take a drive home after a long day of work. The roads were eerily empty, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the last person left in the world. The headlights of my car sliced through the thick darkness as I cruised down a desolate stretch of highway, the only sound being the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of wind outside. I was about 30 minutes away from my destination, and everything seemed normal, but the longer I drove, the more I started feeling uneasy. There was this strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I glanced into my rearview mirror, but it was just an empty road behind me. Still, that creeping feeling wouldn't go away. My eyes kept darting from the road to the rearview mirror, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. It was then that I saw the headlights. At first, it seemed like a normal car pulling up behind me, but as I continued driving, I realized the car wasn't just following me at a normal distance. It was tailing me, way too close. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe I was just paranoid, but the feeling intensified. The car was right on my tail, not speeding up to pass, but staying dangerously close, like it was waiting for something. I started to drive faster, but the car matched my speed, never once letting up. Every turn I took, it took. Every lane change, it mirrored. There was no way I could shake this car. I pulled off the highway, thinking maybe it would stop following me, but it pulled off too. My heart was pounding in my chest as panic set in. I was on unfamiliar roads now, isolated, and it seemed like this car had nowhere else to be except with me. I started thinking about what to do next. Should I call the police? Should I stop and confront them? But I couldn't bring myself to stop the car. I didn't know what this person wanted, but it didn't feel safe. I was in the middle of nowhere, and it seemed like nobody would hear me scream. Suddenly the car flashed its brights, a clear warning. At that moment, I made a decision. I sped up, weaving through the narrow roads, my car roaring as I pushed it to its limits. The car behind me did the same. It was a sickening game of cat and mouse. It felt like I was being hunted. As the road curved sharply ahead, I took a deep breath and slammed my foot on the gas, hoping for one final push to get away. I flew down the road, taking the curve so fast I thought I might lose control. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the car was gone. For the first time that night, I felt a little relief. I didn't stop driving until I was home. I locked the doors and checked all the windows, still shaken by the experience. The car never caught up to me, but the fear stayed with me. The next day I drove down the same road trying to make sense of what had happened. I couldn't see any trace of the car. It was like it had vanished. I haven't driven that route late at night since, but every time I'm on the road I can't shake the feeling that someone might be watching, waiting. And now, every time I hear a car creeping up behind me late at night, I can't help but feel my heart race, wondering if it's them again. It was a quiet, uneventful night. I had been driving for hours, making my way home from a business trip. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I hit the long stretch of highway that led to my town. The road was empty, with only a few scattered streetlights illuminating the dark expanse. I was tired, but I wanted to get home, so I pushed on, the steady hum of my car engine providing some comfort. About 20 miles from my exit, I noticed something strange. A car appeared behind me out of nowhere. I didn't see it in my rearview mirror before, but now it was tailing me closely. At first, I figured it was just a fellow traveler, but as the minutes passed, I started to feel uncomfortable. The car didn't change lanes, didn't try to pass. It just followed me, staying right behind me no matter how fast or slow I went. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Then, suddenly, my headlights flickered. I wasn't sure if it was the car in front of me or if something was wrong with mine. I tapped the brakes to check, and the car behind me responded by tapping its brakes too. At that moment, I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't just another late-night driver. This felt deliberate, like they were watching me. I didn't know what to do. I could feel my pulse quicken as I scanned the empty road ahead. No exits, no gas stations, no signs of life for miles. I debated pulling off the road to see if the car would pass, but every instinct told me that would be a bad idea. So, I kept driving. The car behind me wasn't slowing down. I glanced at my side mirror and saw it getting closer. I sped up a little, hoping it would back off, but it didn't. It just kept pace with me. The anxiety was starting to get to me. I considered calling the police, but my phone had no signal in the area. I felt completely isolated, trapped in the middle of nowhere. Just as I started to lose it, I saw headlights in the distance. Another car was approaching from the opposite direction. I had a brief moment of hope, thinking that maybe the other driver would see my situation and realize something was off. But as the car passed by, I noticed something terrifying. The car behind me swerved sharply to the right, onto the shoulder, like it was trying to block the other vehicle from seeing me. At that moment, I realized what was happening. This car wasn't just following me. It was trying to get me off the road. I was terrified, my heart racing as I tried to think of a way out. I spotted a turnoff ahead, a small dirt road leading to a closed-off construction site. Without hesitation, I took the turn at full speed, hoping to lose them in the twists and turns. The car behind me followed, but it wasn't as nimble as mine, and I managed to put some distance between us. I took another sharp turn onto a narrow gravel road that wound through a wooded area. Finally, I stopped, turned off my headlights, and waited in silence, trying to calm my racing heart. I sat there in the dark for what felt like forever, listening for the sound of the car following me. I didn't hear anything for a while, but after a few minutes, I saw the headlights of the car appear again on the main road. It slowly passed the turnoff, clearly searching for me, but it never saw me. I stayed perfectly still, hoping they'd eventually give up and leave. After a long while, they drove off. I didn't wait to see where they were going. I started my car and drove in the opposite direction, taking the long way around just to be safe. I finally reached home, shaken and exhausted. To this day, I have no idea who they were or what they wanted. I've driven that stretch of road a few times since, but the memory of that night always lingers. There's a lingering unease every time I see headlights in my rearview mirror. That night felt too real, too dangerous, and I still wonder if I was just one wrong move away from something much worse. It was a typical drive home from a business trip. I had just wrapped up a meeting in Oklahoma City and was heading back to my place in Tulsa. The highway was eerily quiet, and the clock on my dashboard read 1:15 a.m. The long, empty stretch of Interstate 44 between the two cities was notorious for its lack of exits, and with no sign of other cars, I felt completely alone. The night was clear, and the road was well lit with the occasional passing street lamp. As I cruised along, the sound of the tires humming against the asphalt was the only thing keeping me company. About 30 miles out of Oklahoma City, I noticed a set of headlights behind me, but I didn't think much of it. There were a few other drivers who often made this trip, especially late at night. But this car didn't pass. It just stayed behind me. I adjusted my rearview mirror, trying to get a better look, but all I could see was the glow of the headlights. I accelerated a little, thinking it was just someone on a similar route, but the car didn't speed up to pass. It stayed at the same distance, keeping me in its sights. As the minutes passed, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just the fact that the car was tailing me. It was how close it was getting. I couldn't make out any details of the vehicle. It felt like they were intentionally staying right behind me, getting closer with every mile. I glanced at the side mirror, but all I could see was the outline of the car, headlights too bright to make out any specific features. I started to speed up, hoping that if I increased my speed, the car would back off. But no. If anything, it sped up too, staying just a few feet behind me. I was starting to panic, my heart racing as the road ahead seemed to stretch on forever with no sign of civilization. About 20 miles outside of Norman, I decided to take an exit for a gas station, hoping that maybe the car would just keep going. I pulled into the gas station, parked far from the pump, and sat there for a moment, checking my phone for a signal. Nothing. It was the middle of nowhere. No bars, no signal, just complete silence. I watched through the windshield as the car slowed down, but instead of continuing down the highway, it turned into the gas station, pulling up behind me. I immediately locked the doors, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what to do. Should I confront them? Should I drive off? I could feel my stomach drop as the car parked just a few spots away. I waited for what felt like an eternity, too afraid to even make eye contact with the driver. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the tension in the air was undeniable. The car's headlights remained on, shining directly at me, and then, after what felt like a full minute, the driver cut their engine. Complete silence. No movement. No sound. I could see the outline of someone through the tinted windows of the car, but they didn't get out. They just sat there, staring at me. I tried to steady my breathing, looking around for anyone else, but the gas station was deserted. There was no one around, no one to help if things went wrong. Finally, after a few more minutes, the car turned its headlights off and backed out of the parking space, slowly pulling back onto the highway. I waited until the sound of their tires faded before I dared to start my car again. I didn't leave the gas station immediately. I waited, watching the empty road in the distance, until I was sure the car had gone. Only then did I drive back onto the highway, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than ever. I kept driving, my mind racing, my eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. I didn't stop again until I reached Tulsa. That night still haunts me, and every time I drive that stretch of I-44, I can't shake the memory of that car following me. What were they trying to do? Why didn't they just pass me? I'll never know. Thanks for watching. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, make sure to like and subscribe to Night Shrieks for more terrifying tales. Don't forget to turn on notifications. You never know when the next nightmare will drop. Got a horror story of your own? Share it in the comments. We're always listening. Stay safe, stay aware, because sometimes the scariest things happen when you least expect them. Until next time, sleep tight.